in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to just turn off our mesh right now. We can dismiss this. What we'll do actually is we're going to turn the mesh back on, and we will just delete. Let's delete this mesh. So in the Edit tab, there's an option Delete Elements, and I'm just going to do Select All. Okay, so that gets rid of that. We're back to our surface geometry. And what we're going to do now is go into the Blocking tab. This is, like I said, I've told you this before, no one ever really explained to me this or showed me this blocking technique, explained structured meshing to me. So that's what I'm trying to do here. Hopefully it's a use, or at least in the future you know, oh yeah, I know the general steps in this sort of thing. So blocking is a whole other sort of thing. You actually have to create a block, okay? So what we do is select this button, create block, and the part solid, okay, and we're going to do here a 2D planar block and say apply. So you see what that does is it creates a couple things. Well, it creates this square, okay, that's an outline, and it creates a new tab. So we now have another item under our model tree, the blocking tab, okay. And there's a couple things here: vertices, edges, faces, blocks, and pre-mesh. So in the blocking technique, what you do is you create a block structure that's not your mesh. You try to design it. It has a pre-mesh built in. It's not actually a mesh yet until you convert that pre-mesh to a structured or unstructured mesh. So let me demonstrate. So here, let's turn on blocks. That's our actual block structure. So right now, when it creates a square, and the blocks are just like they sound, they're just squares or rectangles, or I guess like hexahedrals, not elements, but hexahedral shapes in 3D, then what it's trying to do is it wants to, this block is associated with this part, okay? So if I were to show a pre-mesh at this point, again, I'm just pushing buttons here. It says mesh is currently out of date. Recompute, say yes. And that's what it does. It was able to fill in the geometry with a block of basically this shape. So let me turn off the block. Let me turn off the edges. And I have the pre-mesh shown. Okay. So if I right-click on pre-mesh, I can say convert to unstructured mesh. Mesh already exists, replace it. Alright, so now let me drop down this mesh tab, and here are the shells. So let me turn off blocking, so we're not showing anything. Turn on the shells, and that's actually an element. So I would export that as one quadrilateral that block filled up. Okay, so what we want to do now, let's turn our blocking back on. Let's turn off our mesh. Turn on our edges, and what I can do now is something called associate. Maybe I should show you first if I refine that mesh. So there's a thing called the pre-mesh parameters. So let me set that to 2, increase that, apply, show the pre-mesh. Okay, so you see that it just subdivided that. So again, if I converted that, convert to unstructured mesh, that's my mesh actually for this geometry. And you could continue that process. Five. And the scale factor is increased even more. Again, that's my mesh. So it's not really doing me any good. Turn off blocking. That's my mesh. Turn off my geometry. That's what gets exported out of. If I save this as an Abacus file or whatever it would be, that's what gets exported. So I'm trying to represent a geometry that's circular with a mesh that all the blocking could give me was a square. Now, I can improve this. What if I want to try to get that circle? So let's turn blocking back on, turn off the mesh, turn on my geometry. Okay, and let's show the blocks here. Now what you can do is something called association. So in blocking there's things called projection, and you try to project the edges or nodes to a certain surface or curves. So that button here is called associate, okay, that technique. And here I'm going to do associate vertex. I'm actually going to associate edge to a curve. Okay, I want the edge blocks to be associated with my circular curve. So let me select that, and it says select the edge. Okay, so that's the block edge, and then select the curve. Okay, so you see that the curve on my surface just got selected. In order for that to work, you have to have the geometry curves checked. So that's one issue I was having before. So now I can push the middle mouse button. Okay, and let's see. Close this. All right, and then pre-mesh, yes. Okay, so what happened now was that edge was projected onto this surface. Okay, I can do that for all the other edges, and it's the pretty sophisticated algorithms. So I'm going to do this edge, okay, and I'll do this curve, and there we go. It projects that mesh. And let's do the other ones while we're at it. And this curve. Okay, so there we have our pre-mesh recomputed and projected onto the geometry. Let's actually convert that, take a look at it, convert to unstructured mesh, turn off our blocking, and there we have our mesh. Looks like it's conforming to the surface really well. However, we have terrible quality. If we go into our edit mesh, look at the quality here. Let's go quality, apply, off, zoom in on. There we go. So we have an element way down here, pretty low quality. Okay, and these start to get selected. Those corners are really bad. Okay. So you can see those corners are poor quality in our mesh. So how do we, because we're trying to put a square into a circle, so how do we deal with that? Well, in blocking, there's a technique you can do. It's called, one of it's called O-gridding. Sometimes people call it butterfly technique. So we go back to our blocking, turn off our mesh, turn on our blocking, and turn on our, let's fit here, okay. And surfaces, curves, our geometry. Let's turn off our pre-mesh right now. Okay, so one of the things we can do now is try to modify our block structure to achieve a better quality mesh. So one avenue you do that is an O-grid. But before I show you that, I want to demonstrate what an O-grid actually means. And so what we're going to do here is go to the blocking tab, and then the split block option. This is the first one, so we're going to select this block, select the only block there, the block 4, and then it says select the edge. So what you can do is, if you just select an edge here, it will put a line down it. Okay, so you accept that. Let's get rid of our pre-mesh here. And we're going to do that again here. Accept that. We're going to select this edge, select that, and select that. All right. We've now taken one block, subdivided into 9. We now want to remove these corners. Okay. So there we want to delete a block. So we select this, 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 accept, and then you're left with this structure. Okay. And this is a one block in the middle with each face has an extrusion. And what we're going to do now is merge these vertices. Okay. So to do that, go 2 vertices on this panel. There's a merge vertices option, and we can actually merge to average, and you select, oops, let's see here, propagate merge, merge to average, 2 vertices, 1, 2, there we go. Okay, and then we do that all the way around. Oops. For the corner nodes. Then we're left with this structure. Okay, so we've now merged these vertices, and we deleted by deleting those corners. Now we can move those vertices. So if we actually run this now, let's do a pre-mesh. Hard to see. Let's turn on. So it changed our mesh a little bit for sure, but it doesn't look that great at all yet. Okay, so what we need to do is actually project these vertices into that surface. Well, first we need to move them around a little bit. So let's move vertices. Move this one in here. I'm going to turn off this pre-mesh for right now. It's going to cause me problems. Okay, ooh, you can see it's getting pretty wild there. Let's turn that off. Go back to merge vertices. Okay, now to that one. Okay, I arranged the vertices sort of in the middle of the circle. Now I'm going to project these edges back to the surface. Let me just check to make sure. Blocks, and then okay, I've already associated those. So if we turn off, that's the pre-mesh, and you can see how nice the mesh is. Let me turn off. Okay, turn off blocking. All right, so there's our mesh. I could arrange these a little bit better, but what you can see here, so the block structure, you can see the underlying structure of it here. If you remember, we manually extruded each face, okay, merged the vertices, and then created the structure. Well, there's another way to do it. So let's turn off this. Let's remove our blocks. Let's delete the blocks. Okay, so we're just left with our geometry. What we do is create a block. We're going to do 2D planar, apply. Oops. So there's our block. We can just go in here to the split command and select block. This is the O-grid option right here, and select that. Say OK. And so what it did now is that it basically did those steps for us. It created 5 blocks, turn those on, 5 blocks, 1 in the middle, and then we can associate these edges to the circle. So let's go to associate edges. We'll do 4 outside ones, and we're going to actually select project vertices here. Select the comp curve. Okay, so we get this. We can show our pre-mesh now. Turn off our blocks. Okay, so we have a mesh like that. We can subdivide that. So mesh parameters, maybe factor, double that. Okay, maybe one more. Okay, now you can see that nice mesh that we have. Do that one more time. Okay, looks pretty good. So that's the kind of process you can do. So hopefully this was useful for you to understand structured versus unstructured meshing. We could then convert this to our unstructured mesh and then export it. So that's pretty much it. Hopefully you have a good picture of this now. And this can be done in 3D. Block structures are complicated. So this is a 2D case. It's very simple, but you could see that the butterfly O-grid effect was still challenging. Well, in 3D, it's even more challenging, and so it's really kind of an art and a way to train your brain to think about, you look at an object, how can it be structured meshing using blocks and projections and things like that. So hopefully this is useful.